Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Suzanne and Sarah YouTube channel. I'm Suzanne.
And I'm Sarah.
And today we are going to talk to you about 10 tips for buying raw land. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Suzanne and Sarah YouTube channel. I'm Suzanne Moore.
And I'm Sarah Willis. We are Central Oregon's investment and real estate experts.
As I said, my name is Suzanne Moore. I'm a realtor here in beautiful, sunny Bend, Oregon with Realty One Group Discovery, and I am the founder of the Central Oregon Investor Network, which brings together investors not only from Central Oregon, but from all over the country and even Canada to come together, share resources, learn from one another with the ultimate goal of creating more passive income in our lives through real estate investments.
And I'm Sarah Willis. Suzanne Moore and I are a team here at Realty One Group Discovery, and we are licensed realtors helping people buy and sell homes in Central Oregon primarily, but all over the state. And we are connectors, first and foremost, connecting people with information and resources all around the country. Today, we are discussing tips for buying raw land. We bring you videos every single week on real estate investing topics and also venture to explore what it's like to live in Central Oregon so you know what to expect when you come to visit here or when you decide you want to buy a home here. We've got a QR code here up on the screen. Please screenshot it. It's the best way to stay in touch with us. You'll get email reminders on our our monthly investor meetups where we talk about topics more in depth, as well as if you're searching for a property here in Central Oregon, we put together a really great curated list of Ben's best deals. Before this video is over, we invite you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Okay, so why would somebody want to purchase raw land? Well, there are a few reasons for this. Buying raw land can be really rewarding, whether you're planning to build your dream home, start a business, hold on to it as an asset, or put your little tiny home community or rent it out on Hip Camp. There's lots of different possibilities with raw land. It does also come with a unique set of challenges, which we'll talk about, and things to consider. So to help you make a smart investment, we have compiled our list of the top 10 tips for buying raw land.
Number one most important thing when it comes to buying any property or doing any investing is really to develop and define your goals. So before you start searching, it's really important to have an understanding of what your big picture is. Here we're asking, are you buying residential, commercial, agricultural land? Are you looking for a piece of land to build your dream home? So build to suit is what we call that. Land for recreation. Are you someone who has a dream of developing a piece of land with multiple properties, or are you just looking for a place to put your money and watch it grow, buy and hold?
The first thing you want to do when you're considering buying raw land is understanding zoning and city ordinances, maybe also county ordinances. The reason you want to understand the rules and regulations when you buy raw land is you want to make sure that you can do with that land what you want. And there are various municipalities that may limit what you can do with your property. So you really want to make sure you understand zoning. Zoning is huge, and zoning regulations really impact what you can do with your land. You'll want to check with your local authorities, so the county, the city, any HOA, any covenants, conditions, or restrictions on the property that live on the deed, and making sure there aren't any other land use restrictions that would affect your use of the property. You also want to be aware of any potential changes that might be coming in the future. We know you can't always predict this, but it's helpful to stay up on the news and talk to local experts to ensure that you can use your property for what you want. And for example, this means some properties in Central Oregon are zoned recreation only. That means you cannot build a permanent structure on the property, but you can have personal property on the structure that can be moved off, like little cabins on skids, for example, or campers, different types of things. So these are all things you need to check with the county, the city, the HOA to make sure you can do what you want.
Number three is understanding utility access. So This really just means location, knowing how far the nearest utilities are, your public utilities are, so you can account for the cost. As you'll see, one big theme with considerations for buying raw land is that location matters. And it all is going to come down to location and how money is associated with that. So how much money you're spending based on your location and potentially how much money you can make back in the long term on your money. But in this case, access to utilities like water, electric, gas, sewage systems, all critical for any development projects. So depending on where you buy your land, you may be developing your utilities as an off-grid property if utilities are really far away. So we here in Central Oregon, we see some properties in Prineville, for example, that are all on solar and have cisterns for collecting water that have to be filled, and having
Compostable
toilets. So that is one off-grid way to deal with utilities. It just really kind of depends on your goals and your comfort levels. And then sort of the other end of the spectrum is, how close are you to public sewer and water? Is that right at the street? That's of course going to minimize your cost. Or are you in an area like South County here or deep Southeast that are typically on septic systems or wells, and those have their own associated cost also. So, with septic and well, you may be spending more money up front to put these systems in, but long-term, you're not paying the public utility bill for those systems. So just all things to take into consideration there. Finally, access to gas. You're not going to find access to gas hookups everywhere. So again, if you're closer to somewhere where there's public water and sewer hookups in the street, you may have access to gas. Or are you going to have to consider having a separate tank that comes and gets filled? So all of this is going to affect your budget and things you want to keep in mind.
Next up is soil type, and we are going to tell you why soil type matters when you are buying raw land. So getting a soil test when you are looking at land is really important for assessing the land's suitability for construction or agricultural use. So different soil types have varying drainage and stability properties. So knowing this, the soil quality will really help you plan and budget for any necessary expenditures that will come into play depending on your goals. So for agricultural use, you'll want to, of course, first check zoning, but then making sure that the soil is amenable to the types of crops that you are planning to plant on the property. Excavation is another potential expense to keep in mind. Here in Central Oregon, we have a lot of lava rock, and that stuff can be kind of expensive to excavate. So if you're on a steep hill, excavation costs will also be higher. Drainage is also super important to make sure you have proper drainage off of the property to keep water away from any built structures. And then finally, it's going to be really important to understand the soil for septic test feasibility. So if you do not have a sewer to the property, if the property does not already have septic and you are planning to build there, there will need to be test pits dug, and then they will also check for groundwater level to ensure that any septic system would not affect the groundwater. So different septic systems are required in different parts of Central Oregon, depending on the groundwater level. From a standard system that's about $10,000 all the way up to an alternative treatment system that might cost you in excess of $35,000. So certainly worth doing your due diligence here.
Number 5 consideration is surveys. So land use surveys. So hiring a professional for these is important. Surveys are really important for knowing your land. It's, if this is a bare piece of land and you're surrounded by bare land and no fencing, it's going to be pretty important to know where the boundaries are and have stakes put there or fencing, or whatever it is that you're doing with the land. There's different types of surveys. So a survey will accurately determine your boundaries. It will help you learn if there are any easements, like utility easements or driveway easements, and also help you determine if it's a more developed area with fencing in place already, especially in terms of agricultural land, but a lot of times in residential areas as well. You can learn through a survey if someone's encroaching on your property, and it's something to deal with. 10 feet out of 40 feet. That's a lot of 4,000 square feet worth of land that someone's got fenced off on your property. You probably want to do something about that. So these are important tools and resources to have when you are considering purchasing land. So these are precise measurements and maps that are made out of this process. And once you have a survey done, it gets recorded with the county. And if there ever is a dispute, it's something that you can go to point to resolve it. So this is something that when you are doing your diligence for property, there may be a survey. It's something you can look up at the county. And if there's not, it's definitely something you want to consider having done. So there are boundary surveys, and there's also topographical surveys as well. So a few different types to learn about your property with.
Next up is accessibility, because you want to be able to get to your property. As we love to say in real estate, location is everything. And you're really going to want to understand how accessible it is to the land by road. Also, what kind of road? A gravel road, a paved road, a dirt road, a donkey track. You never know.
No road.
No road. And if it's challenging to access or requires extensive road construction, that's going to add cost to your project. So maybe there is no road, and like Sarah just said, it's going to cost you a lot of extra money to be able to create that accessibility. You also want to consider the proximity to amenities, because if you're using the property or planning to sell it in the future, folks are going to want to know where the schools are, where hospitals are, shopping centers, and accessibility is really important and can affect the property's value. Location, we know, is always the primary determinant in value of a property. So make sure you know how you're getting there. And one other little tip of the trade that we've learned too is paved roads can sometimes be an advantage over gravel roads, unless you really like off-roading.
Environmental factors. So did we already tell you? Have you learned yet? Location is everything in determining this. Mother Nature is part of the big picture here. So you're really going to want to consider what environmental factors are going to affect your property. Is it in a flood zone? Is it in a wetland? Does it have a wildlife habitat zoning overlay that is going to prevent you from starting a business there, for example? So environmental regulations really can just restrict development in certain areas or require mitigation, which is going to cost you money. So if you're in a wetland, you might have to build up your land in order to build a house, for example. So just really important to understand these factors when deciding what you're going to do with this land and how you're going to use it.
Next up, you're going to need to consider some additional items in your budget. So let's talk about what those are. These are sometimes called hidden costs, things that are not totally obvious that you might find out later unless you use really good realtors. So buying raw land often involves obtaining various permits and paying fees for development, for bringing in utilities, for trying to change zoning or getting conditional use permits, and for getting those environmental assessments if you want to build on land that has wetlands or other environmental factors. So you want to make sure you budget for these things, and the way you do that is you contact the appropriate authorities and get quotes for these things to be done, because they can add up quickly and they can vary greatly from one location to another.
Number 9 is we just want to convey, if you're buying land, you don't want to do it alone. You really need a team to help you get the job done. So this team looks like your real estate agent, potentially your lender, your architect, your engineer, your surveyor, your environmental consultant, all these things that we've already talked about. You're going to want to consult with experts along the way. And yeah, just don't hesitate to ask for help in this process, because that is what is going to help you create the most holistic picture. And spending a little bit of money up front on these experts is going to save you money and make you more money in the long term.
Finally, we want to help you get the best deal when you do buy raw land. So we would advise you to negotiate wisely, and you want to negotiate on various things. Purchase price is the big one. So you would want to have your realtor research comparable properties in the area and see what market value they sold for. And you don't be afraid to negotiate with the seller. Keep in mind that buying raw land is often a long-term investment, and securing a good deal up front can really pay off in the long run. So things that will affect your negotiation is, how long has it been on the market? I bought a piece of property that had been on the market for years, and I got it for half price with seller financing. So I was able to negotiate really well because obviously it didn't work for everybody else, but it worked for me. Again, you're looking at those comp sales. You want to understand the seller's motivation. Type of financing is also important. So I just told you I bought with seller financing. That meant I only had to put 20% down on land, which generally can be difficult to finance, but the sellers were the bank, so I only put a little bit down. They carry the contract. And it is a long-term investment. Land does appreciate, not necessarily as quickly as land with structures on it, but it's a great way to have a long-term asset that can help make you a return on your money. So to wrap it all up today, we just want you to remember one thing. Do your research, do your due diligence, and make sure you have experts who are guiding you through the process so that you have a successful land acquisition. With the right approach, you can really turn your raw land purchase into a valuable asset that fulfills your objectives. So thank you so much for joining us today for our top 10 tips on buying raw land. I'm Suzanne.
And I'm Sarah. Thanks for watching. Remember, use that QR code to get in touch with us, and please like and subscribe before you go.